Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. As usual, we'll give people a few minutes to join and start a few minutes after the hour.
I will beg people to add their names.
You don't need to beg. You can just ask.
I could, but if I beg, maybe more people will do it. Now, one thing I will do is I will add the link with the hopes that folks will do it.
Good morning and afternoon, everyone.
Yeah. And I see Amir is here.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to propose a last-minute addition to our agenda. Just wanted to give a quick update on the status of Census 2 from Harvard.
Absolutely.
Would you mind screen sharing the agenda, David? I can't get access to that link yet.
Oh. Can you post in the chat your email and we will
Sure.
fix that?
do that now.
Alrighty. Using the vast power of copy and paste. All right, you have been added. You will
Thank
probably
you.
need to refresh your that particular tab.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I see some things getting added to the agenda. That looks great. If anybody has anything, feel free to add it as we go through the meeting.
So everybody okay with the proposed agenda?
I think it's a good place to start. We can always add on if we need to.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it's about 5 after the hour. So hopefully everybody's here that wants to be. Thanks for joining. And again, a reminder that David mentioned, if you'd like, you could add yourself as an attendee to the meeting notes. The meeting notes are pasted in the chat and also attached to the calendar invite. You do have to join the group to get access to edit. And then, okay, yeah, let's continue on. So the first thing we like to do in every meeting is invite anybody that's new or hasn't yet introduced themselves to go ahead and do so if you would like. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're here, what you're looking to get out of the OSSF.
Sure, I can dive in. I think I'm new to this particular working group, or it's been a long time since I've been here. John Meadows from Citibank. I run cloud security engineering and AppSec, but also a lot of the software supply chain work. We've been open sourcing a lot of our work through the CNCF with some best practices work, and we're working on a secure software factory, which we're looking to donate to the OSSF.
Awesome, welcome. Glad to have you. Anyone else?
I'm Emily Fox. I am the CNCF Security Technical Advisory Group co-chair.
Can you
Welcome,
repeat
Emily.
that title?
Quite a long time since I joined this meeting. Ava Black. I lead open source ecosystem security at a part of Microsoft. I'm also on the OSI board. Some of you probably know me from the CNCF Tag Security or from the Confidential Computing Consortium.
Welcome, Ava. Nice to see you again.
Hey, I'm Tom from Bloomberg. I'm leading some of the software supply chain security efforts. Just kind of making my way around each of the working groups to see which we can help contribute to and which kind of help us as well move forward with a lot of this work.
Well, this is great. A lot of new people. Welcome, everyone. And if you're not aware, like we have the GitHub repo where we state our mission and kind of the things that we tend to do in this meeting and some of the projects that are part of this group. So check that out. All right, well, let's move along. Status of Census 2 from Harvard.
Okay, so I think this is me giving a quick status report. And just let me give you the punchline. The new Census 2 is expected to be released mid-February. They have all the data analyzed and result. They've got a draft report. A whole bunch of people are now beating them up on it, as it happens when you write a report. What do you mean? Where'd you get this? Explain this, that sort of stuff. But I think we're in. Everything is looking good for release. Um, the they use 3 data sources, 3 different SCA suppliers, as sort of that starting point for looking down at what software is used. The agreements with those was that the analyzed, not the report, but the data analyzed results will be shared with them, and they would have until the 1st of February to object because something super sensitive would be revealed by it. We're not expecting any such issues, um, and folks have been through this round before, so you know. So we're not expecting any issues, but of course, there's always a possibility. Once that report is released, and reports, you go back and forth and review comments, and it may be a few days later than that, but I'm expecting it to be relatively imminent. Once it's released, I think the expectation by many is that this working group would then look through that list and decide what to add, what to change in its list of critical open source projects based on that data. I'll tell you right now that they have basically they have several different tables. One issue is NPM versus not NPM, and another issue is direct versus transitive. Um, uh, so basically, because of the way NPM manages their packages, um, I don't. I think I think the vast majority of you are already aware, but just in case someone isn't, NPM, the ecosystem works very differently from most other package ecosystems. About half of the packages have either 0 or 1 function at most. There's a real drive towards incredibly tiny packages. Something that would be a single package in any other ecosystem might be 100 or 300 packages in NPM. As a result, when you start doing these transitive dependencies and counting, any counts of an NPM package will just completely obliterate any other package just because of the way the ecosystem works. And so instead of trying to figure out a way to normalize this, which is just truly different, they're just going to have them as 2 separate buckets. It's just it's hard to figure out another way, and since it's unique, why there's no need to do that. They are going to talk about direct versus transitive dependencies. Some things are direct, some are not. One big difference with this Census 2, with this updated version versus the original Census 2, that's already public. There are several differences. One is they're going to have 3 SCA vendors, so more data, a lot more data to work with. Another difference is that they're taking exact versions into account, which is something that I actually had done back when I was at IDA, when we did some preliminary prototypes. We handed them our code. Turns out it's a lot of work to do that. You got to do it correctly because there are many ways to do it that will take several years. So the algorithms you use matter. And they've already found that there's a number of disturbing trends where particular versions that are very, very old are actually at least as popular or more popular than not just current versions, but current branches. You know, the log, you know, a lot of people, for example, weren't vulnerable to log4shell because they were using the log4j version 1 branch, which has known vulnerabilities and hasn't been maintained in years and is expressly not maintained for years. And so that's the kind of stuff that they're pulling out, which I think will surprise 0 people in the IT world, but I think it's good to have the actual data to show it. All good? Questions? Oh, I'm getting off easy. I'm surprised. Must be early morning for some folks. Questions truly are welcome, by the way. You know, just it's.
So when we do go through it,
Yes.
how much weight should we add to it? I mean, should we, you know, what do we do when we see a discrepancy?
Okay, what kind of discrepancy are we talking about? As in, you think the analysis was wrong, or the analysis is right, but we have other information?
Either way, like if they think it's very important and you know we already passed on it, or vice versa.
Okay. Let me put my cards on the table because I actually did although I didn't use exactly the same approach that Harvard's done. You know, I actually wrote the Census, or now called the Census 1 report, and I did some preliminary prototyping for this Census 2 approach. I'm a big believer in doing data analysis and making decisions based on data, but I also think that that is important information that you then hand off to humans to do a final cut. In this particular case, I think it's especially important because this analysis only looks at how common it is. It does not even determine whether or not it's directly network accessible, which we did try to do, which I did try to do in Census 1, for example. We did try to weight not just how popular something was, but how exposed it was. Census 2, and frankly, I can sympathize. The amount of data they're trying to deal with is huge. They're taking on a larger scale, and they don't have the kind of data that lets them do some of that kind of analysis. And so they intentionally focus very much on the, you know, let's first, you know, from every SCA supplier we can, all the data of every application they've analyzed, and then backtrack and identify what the sum of all those applications most depend on. So I say all that as a prefix to say, I think we need to, as humans, go through and add human knowledge of context that the numerical analysis cannot provide. And this was even done with Census 1, for example. We found that certain applications were very network accessible, but it was unlike, you know, the folks who were going to use them that way was very relatively small, and other projects were more important. So I think the expectation is that this is going to be important new work, but we need a group of people to look at it. All of you, really, everybody we can get, you know, to look at the context. You know, if there's an unintentional vulnerability, how bad would that be? If there's a malicious, you know, attack, how bad would that be, and how likely would that to be? You know, I would worry, for example, a lot about malicious attacks on supply chains that had huge impacts, and it's you know, it's a single person, so it's unlikely to be caught before it's released. Versus, you know, I would worry less about something within a foundation with a whole bunch of folks for intentional. However, unintentional, yeah, I worry a lot about, especially if it's got, you know, network accessibility. Those kinds of things are very, very hard for computer analysis today. So I realize it's a really long answer to a simple question, but I think I need to give some justification. So does that make sense? And feel free to disagree.
I think it's a good question and a good answer. I was just wondering if we write that down a bit more in a bit more detail to pull out the sort of things that we'd be looking for. I think it's a great point.
there's a little bit of that on the on this working group's website, I believe. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be documented better. But yeah, because I actually agree with you. I think that's it's important to write that down. Other questions?
Yeah, so David, I really love incorporating human expertise. I think we forget that that counts as data too, and not to go into ML terminology, but that's a kind of a semi-supervised approach that has like in the ML space consistently yields better results than unsupervised approaches alone. So it makes perfect sense. I guess one of the things that I am wondering about is what is the plan to go about recruiting those people that have that domain expertise, and how are you making sure that it's a representative sample?
I think you've got it backwards. We're
Oh,
in.
okay.
Congratulations. If you're showing up, then you're providing expertise.
I mean, that's great, but I don't think we're representative.
I think the short answer is that we're expecting all of us to do some research to go back and look at. But I don't have a way of bringing in everybody in the world. I don't know
No,
anybody else who does either. So I don't have, if we're expecting expertise in all things, I don't see how we're going to manage that.
not expertise in all things necessarily. It's just a matter of not just that trivializes it. But it is a matter of ensuring that when we are providing data from our own experiences, from our own research, that we have enough folks from varied backgrounds to be able to provide a well-rounded sample. I think Ava had a point that they were looking to make.
I also didn't want to, thank you, but I didn't want to jump the queue. I think Jonathan had a hand up before me.
I'm sorry.
I think it might have been Jack as well, but it really just an add to that is that, I was thinking of reaching out to red team groups and also teams within our own companies and organizations to try and provide that additional human input. We know certain things are more accessible. We know certain things aren't used, or I think to David's point, aren't maintained by as many people as others. And we can bring that sort of additional information to bear.
Yeah. I'm happy to yield to Ava and then pick up a point afterwards.
My comment might be more applicable to the alpha part of alpha omega than this, but it might also be applicable here. But I would suggest the process we start to create be built to include that sort of human information that Julia was pointing at from domain experts who are not in this group and won't be in this group, but we know where they are. They're in those projects, they're in those domains. We need to actively choose to include them rather than assume that the knowledge is contained in whoever shows up here.
Okay. We'll need to figure out how to do that then. I think our first run around, we were in a hurry to support a particular group, the Great MFA Project, which we'll talk about in a moment. I am all for improving the process and getting more and better, but we'll need to figure out how to do that.
Within the context of alpha omega, I've been suggesting to Michael that part of the model is when a project is identified, either because alpha or omega scans it and finds a vulnerability, or alpha decides that it's in that top tier and we need to actively continually engage. we find a liaison within that project's maintainer community. That is a contact point. That person is invited, they're on the mailing list, and that sort of flips it from we're concerned about this project to we're engaging with this project and able to gather information. But that becomes formalized as part of the OpenSSF's process for outreach and connection.
I would agree with that, absolutely. Typically, when we do any kind of engagement, step one is build a relationship with the project, find the core maintainers, the folks who are, hands-on, and see how we can help them. So definitely +1 on that.
Yeah, if I can, our next time is going to be talking about Alpha Omega. So let's talk more about Alpha Omega for that. I don't want to lose this thought though about. I think last year we were in a hurry to try to support the MFA project. My thanks to everybody. It was a rushed process. On the other hand, we got something, and we got a whole bunch of results. So I don't think we need to. But I do think that a way to get more engagement with more expertise, more analysis would be awesome. And so let's talk about how to do that. I'm not sure how to do that. I'd love to hear others' ideas on it.
Yeah, I have a suggestion, or suggestions that are related, I suppose. So like Julia, I'm going to analogize to something that I've known from my past. In my case, politics. I used to be involved in Australian politics. Please forgive me. And I was very interested in voting theory, very interested in voting systems. I think it would be possible to configure or construct a voting method that would allow us to integrate, so to speak, synthetic votes from software agents, calculating different parts of the criticality score. You might give this index 10 points, then index 20 votes to cast, and then having individual expert opinion cast the votes through the same method, so that you integrate both synthetic and human opinions into a single scoring. It's been a long time since I looked at voting methods, so I would have to go back and look up the properties of them, because you're probably familiar with Arrow's theorem that there's no perfect voting method whatsoever. And there's another one I always forget the name of, which is even scarier. But it is, I believe, possible to do that kind of thing. The one asterisk I'll put nearby that is that it would probably be infeasible to ask people to rank 200 entries. So whatever voting method, we'd have to investigate one that allows you to select partial preferences and say select 20 that people have to rank. And if you have enough people voting, then you can do pairwise comparisons across the whole set with a Condorcet method or something like that. So I'm going to hand wave that detail away for the moment, but I think we could adapt a voting method to combine the opinions.
I'll quickly note that although I doubt I've gotten nearly as much into it as you have, I do know when someone says what a Condorcet method is, I actually know what you're talking about. We actually use OpaVote for a number of votings, including for the FAQ. One challenge I guess I would go back to is, let me propose something, and folks, my opinion is in the end, although data is very, very valuable, the humans end up knowing context that none of the tools are ever going to be able to find. So I would suggest that in the end, it actually not just be humans enter data, but in the end, humans make the decision. Not one human, but humans plural. I'll give you an example from Census 1, which is a couple of years ago. Our scoring method found that mail transfer agents were by far and away one of the most important things in the universe. Why? Because they were widely installed on Linux distros. They could be configured to be network accessible. They processed directly data that was, potentially from an attacker, and they checked off all these boxes. But then you look and say, yes, but they're not. Most distros, they're not configured that way. Very few people run their own mail transfer agents today. And so, the automated system would lead you to one conclusion that a human would look and say, I mean, it's not bad to work on the MTAs, but this NTPD, which manages all the time, and is also directly accessible, way more important.
So to to riff on that very quickly, you could have it as a 2-round. I'm sorry, I'm going down this rabbit hole. You could have a 2-round vote. First round is software agents produce an order. So they vote amongst themselves to create an initial order. That's the order that entries get displayed to humans, and then they can rearrange it. So if they say something like MTA shouldn't be number 1, I think they should be number 17, they move it. But you have at least an initial ordering. I leave it as an exercise to economists to work out whether that's a good idea. I'm just going to pretend that it is and take credit for it if it's good and blame it on you if it's not.
All right, I'm going to try to capture this.
The good
Okay,
thing is, oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, now my apologies. I'm trying to type and I think it was Julia who mentioned it. How do we get more? How can we get more expertise involved? And I think the challenge here is very much the most experts are experts in one area. So if you're into ML, you can riff all day about the advantages of PyTorch, and and so on. Whereas in other areas, you'll riff on other areas, and so it's going to be a challenge to get involved, get everyone, get enough experts involved. I see Julia's hand up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that it is a challenge, and I think this comes back to the conversation from our last meeting about categorization, right? And I believe it was mentioned already that like you can have experts in one subset, one category, or another, and if you're able to appropriately segment out the data, then you can get that broad set of experts coming in to provide information and validation. But it's definitely not an easy problem to solve. So I do recognize that.
I should have put my hand up. I'm sorry. There we go. You can be very fancy and use something like range voting, where this is something that you might be able to get software experts to use. I think it's a terrible idea for general voting, even though its fans are very vociferous. I'm sorry, Ava. I hope we get to your point. Yeah, range voting basically sort of says like, this is my low estimate and my high estimate of this. And if you're not confident, you give a very wide band. And if you're highly confident, you give a narrow band. So it's slightly abstract way of voting. And as I said, the proponents make fabulous mathematical arguments that it solves errors in possibility theorem. I'm skeptical, but that would be a possibility as well.
So I have a request. Jacques, you obviously are familiar with specific voting systems. Would you mind doing a little research on some voting, some ideas, like top 2 or 3 approaches that you think that we can look at for how to do this, and maybe I can beg the same kind of request to Julia on how could we get more expertise involved.
Can I, sorry, for people that jumped in late I missed something critical at the beginning of this whole conversation. The whole topic of voting, can somebody just what was the original thing that was the reason that the topic of needing to vote on a thing came up? Yeah.
In the end, our goal is to produce a list of what are the most critical open source software projects. We have a draft right now. It was developed in a hurry. We're about to get a lot more data dumped on us to help make that decision. But now we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
Thank you. Helpful. Thank you.
But the output of this group is basically a big spreadsheet, hopefully with rationale.
Yeah, so I think you covered, David. We've got two problems here. One, how to find the experts and contact them. Another, how to take the results and do something with them. So Yeah, maybe we go ahead and put an item on next week's calendar to review any kind of proposals or ideas people have for these problems.
I think that sounds good, Jeff. I mean, from our first iteration, which we're going to talk about more when we get into it, but I definitely tried incorporating a lot of basically everything we've all been talking about. It's critical to get a diverse set of viewpoints, for it to be an open sourced, to use a term, or a curated kind of experience where, we're getting all the input from, the community as a whole, and, the folks who are passionate about this stuff, who want to, see progress made on it within the work group. And anything that we can do to engage as many folks as possible, and to get as much expertise as we can incorporated into it. And like you said, David, incorporate both the data side, the quantitative side, with the qualitative data. And I think we can definitely work something a little bit more formalized out. And I think it'll take some time. We'll probably need to spend some sessions on it with the work group, but it'll be well worth it for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I want to quickly add that I think that we ought to capture not just what they are, but some sort of rationale on why they are important.
Yes.
And maybe that's a key, and that's something we can work on together and create as a key input to voting.
All right. With that, if nobody has any important things on this topic, let's go ahead and move to the next update.
There is one thing I wanted to add on this front, which is we should continue to do the automation parts of the bit as well. So the stuff we are doing with criticality score. And the reason for this is we can actually have some good metrics on what's critical to a package management ecosystem. So just to give you a log4j example, right? In December, when we looked at the number of packages in Maven, 8% of them were dependent on log4j, which is a pretty big number. So we actually are looking at pulling in the dependency trees to come up with this kind of a list as well. So we should continue to do the manual part of the curation with different industries, but we should continue to do the automation bits as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming that we're going to continue, the criticality scoring. We're going to have we'll have update. We're actually having updated criticality score information.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have the Harvard data in about a month, in less than a month. Let's say a month. I think we need to try to quickly work out what are we going to do with that, and then try to turn that crank within the next few months, and basically come up with answers on, all right, what do we think the most critical components are? Which is a perfect segue to the next topic, alpha and omega. Can we move on to that topic?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to try to be quick here. For those of you who don't know, there's a project within the OpenSSF called Alpha Omega. It's actually funded. It's approved by the governing board. Google and Microsoft have each put in $2.5 million on this. And there's two parts to Alpha Omega. And Alpha is, I think, really the key part for as far as this group is concerned. The Alpha side of Alpha Omega's goal is to identify a few really critical open source software projects and fund focused work on them. So we talked earlier, I'm sorry that Ava's gone, but basically this is where once it's picked, okay, we're going to work with project X, okay, immediately going to interact with project X, talk to them, what do they need, what are the issues, and then do a whole number of things to try to make that as vulnerability free as we can. So things like do security audit, at least one, probably multiples. Once we've identified issues, work to get them all fixed. Work to not just fix point problems, but help the project update its processes. So things like getting a best practices badge, getting a high scorecard value, getting a high SALSA level, getting it SigStore, getting a signature through SigStore, you know, generating S-bombs, all these things that we would like the projects that we most depend on to be doing. There's no expectation that the alpha side will be able to do this with every project. That's not reasonable. So they're going to want to, they want a short list that they were, and frankly, I'm expecting that at least for a while, they're not going to do every single project that we identify, but they will probably peel off a small subset. But they're going to want they want that list to peel from, and I'm sure they would really like, here's the short list of the most important. We are trying to get more funding, and if we can get more funding, we can work with more and more projects. So we'll see how that works. Questions? Okay. All right. Project list, MFA project.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a quick update because Dave Stewart asked this in our last meeting, and I think it's important to note when we have wins. So that initial list that we did put together at the end of the year was in fact used to get, I think it was between 200 and 400 MFA tokens. Is that right, David?
At least 200. I am late on going back and getting the numbers. I know at the start we had over 200 invitations, but we were trying to do this before the end of the year, and after a while it became, shoot, let's just get the thing done by deadline. So I need to now go back and after a while it became kind of a whirlwind. But I think it was a fabulous success. Every single one, and here's a Titan key by example. So Google gave 500 coupons, GitHub gave 500 coupons for YubiKeys, and we basically contracted all the projects. Well, we tried to contact them. Some didn't respond. I mean, it was near the end of the year. Some responded and said, "Thank you very much. We're already using MFA tokens. We don't need any more." Great answer. But we did have some folks. We added Log4j late on, and we contacted the Log4j folks, and we gave them some MFA tokens as well. So
that's great. And I
every
think
single one is a win.
Yeah, and I think they weren't necessarily just handed out willy-nilly either. They were given to core maintainers or kind of maintainers with higher level access and whatnot. So just want to point that out. I think that's definitely a big win, and we should celebrate the victories. And yeah, so some good things came out of that work that we did as a work group. And so I just want to thank everybody again for that, and give Dave Stewart that update that we were able to actually make some progress. We were able to get some things out and get some good work done. So,
and do we have a sense as to, so you're saying of the 500 that were available, 200 were actually delivered, and then how many are actually being used?
I don't have that number in front of me. Here's a challenge. We did not want to invade anybody's privacy. So what the step one was making sure they got the things and that they got them in time. Are they being used? We asked in two different ways. We've asked the projects to report back. We're going to have to nag them because nobody's reported back yet. And GitHub, now GitHub gave some and Google gave some. In the case of GitHub, the way that they gave them out, they can actually find out how many are being used. My expectation is we're going to need to give them a little time. A number of folks did this at the end of the year, but GitHub believes that GitHub knows which tokens are being used. Now they're not going to give us the individual names; they're just going to give us raw aggregate scores. So I don't have the numbers yet, but we planned everything out to get those numbers. I don't have those numbers yet.
Okay, thanks.
And
it's probably, it's only the 27th of January. So, the way, if you're a part-timer, maintaining a small project, you know, it could take a while. But anyway, thanks for the update.
Yeah, you're really welcome. And you know, so my feeling is if some aren't used but many are, it's okay. I mean, you know, I would love for 100% use, but trying to get that is not reasonable. And you know, I expect that a whole bunch of them will be used because there's, you know, why bother to make the request. I will also concede, by the way, we definitely did that in a rush. I mean, the whole thing was a rush. We didn't realize that the Google coupons were going to expire until at the end of the year, until very late. So we hurried on the process to identify the critical projects, and we also hurried to get the token coupon codes and validation codes out. It was frankly overwhelming. I didn't, you know, anybody who says customer service is easy has never done it. Uh, so there was an incredible amount of time that I and lots of other folks spent interacting with the projects because we didn't want to just give them out to random people. It was for the maintainers of either those projects or the project that they depended on. But really, it was pretty much just those projects. So it was a crazy.
Well, it's also well, thanks for doing it. No, I mean the other you know factor is making sure that anybody who has that level of access, I mean, is using MFA. In other words, if you have like not just one maintainer for the small project, but you have 5, all 5 kind of need to be using it. Otherwise, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Anybody with commit rights.
Let
I
me
mean,
push back
it's slightly
a bit.
better. It's slightly better if a smaller, if a less than the majority, you know, use it. This is just some of the things that were playing in my head that I was sort of like, okay, we can't really talk about that now because we're in a rush to get this list done and get these things out. So it's like, I'm just, you know, I'm a simple-minded, you know, kind of person. I'm just asking simple questions because it was the time to ask the questions was not then. But I appreciate the chance to revisit it because this gives us a sense of, you know, I mean, and maybe one argument is, well, every little bit helps a little. That's not bad. I was hoping we could do, you know, better. So anyway.
Well, you know, I'm gonna push back a little bit. Although you're right that it would be better if you had 100%. There's no doubt of that. It does depend a lot on what the attacker's trying to do. If an attacker is really focused on specifically Project X, then yes, the view would be anybody who's a weak point is a weak point. I think for a lot of attackers, though, they're just interested in attacking anybody. They're not targeting just one project. And so, from that point of view, every single person we provide stronger defenses to means there's one less chink in the armor, as it were. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. 100% would be best. But I'm going to take every single one as a win, especially since for a lot of these attackers, they're just kind of, I won't say spray and pray, but they're just looking for the easy attacks. And so, you know, getting rid of one of those avenues is a great thing. I think Jeff Mendoza has hand up next.
Yeah, do we have a date or a time period for the second wave that we should work on an updated list?
Okay, you mean for MFAs or
for MFA specifically?
Okay, I have no commitments right now from Google that they'll have more tokens. GitHub's coupons didn't expire. So we actually have a number of validation codes actually, but we have a number of validation codes left that we can still use for existing projects, but it has to be YubiKeys with GitHub. We're hoping to talk Google into more. So, but I haven't pressed too hard because, to be honest, by the end of the calendar year, I was exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, should the project set a date to do a second wave of outreach for the rest of the GitHub keys, or did we already have an idea for those?
We haven't. We could. Okay. I mean, that's something to be brought up in the MFAs. I was hoping to quietly talk Google into getting some more so that we could have, more to distribute. Also, to be fair, I think we would love to have the updated critical projects list. And so I
Well, I
think
mean, the
that may be
projects
fun.
list is always going to be getting better.
I
So,
understand, but the thing is, it might make sense for us to have a new MFA drive when we have a new updated list.
yeah, just wondering, like, I'm just trying to figure out like what level of a milestone should we set for our group? Like how much quality do we want to add to our identified list before we say this is a milestone, and we can go ahead and do a second round of MFA? Like, what kind of feeling should we be going for when we work on an updated list, as far as effort versus quality trade-off, you know?
I suspect that if we're going to have a formal voting system, we're not going to want to have revotes and revotes and revotes. We're going to want to have a vote and done. So I'm expecting, I mean, things can always be improved, but I'm expecting that we're going to have some sort of release of this is our best estimate at this date, and then we can re-trigger the MFA process at that after that. That doesn't make me right. That just is kind of what I had in mind. And if we set a target of let's have a new updated much better list within a few months, taking into account a number of comments, like, hey, let's have a better voting system, let's get more expertise. Dave Stewart, I think, had a very good point about we really need to about process improvements, making sure we really can get more asynchronous and more time, less rushed. But I want it to be less rushed, but I don't want it to drag out forever. We need to actually produce something.
Okay, so I'm thinking like the terminology might be a 1.0 release quality of a list is what you're looking for. Okay.
Right. I would call the current version that we have out there a 0.5. It's a draft version. I'm grateful for the draft version because it was acted on. It wasn't just, hey, we made a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet we turned around and interacted with like something like 200 people. So that's pretty impressive. But there was a hand up and then went down. What happened?
I think it was Tom.
Yeah, I think I answered my own question because I was looking for more information on the MFA project, but I found the GitHub page for it. I guess okay. I do have a follow-up question to it. It sounds like you're looking to secure more tokens. Is there appetite to I guess get donations per se from other enterprises? This kind of based around an initiative that's already kind of owned by GitHub and Google.
Okay. It sounds like the question is, will we take donations and use them to help open source software projects get better? The answer is yes. I don't think anybody has any particular limits on who will take resource. I mean, I guess if there's some sort of blood money or something, but I mean, short of some morally objectionable source, I think we'll be delighted.
Yeah, and I was looking particularly in the MFA project. Like, it seems like a very cool thing, a really awesome thing that's also quite tangible as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that really gripped a lot of folks is that, yes, it was done in a hurry. Yes, I'm sure things could have been done better, but my gosh, we went from nothing to over 200 people getting MFA tokens. We expect them. I don't know for sure. I expect the vast majority will be in use, and that means that suddenly attackers have found 200 fewer a little less than 200 fewer places to easily get into a project just through a password. This is a known attack. I mean, projects have already been attacked this way. So that's an awesome thing. So my thanks to everybody.
Yeah, and I think in general, even it was kind of rushed. I think a lot of good things came out of it and some good lessons. The whole idea of focusing on selection criteria, the why, the support or the evidence of why a project belongs on a list like that, and having kind of multiple data points to support why a project should be on the list versus why it shouldn't. And of course, having that kind of community curation where, we kind of talk as a group to, well, have you thought about, this or that, and so overall, I think it was a great, it was a good experience, and a lot of good things came out of it. And kind of like what you were saying, Jeff, we'll just keep iterating, making it better. And I definitely don't think it's going to happen in a month or in, a couple meetings, but the idea that we're constantly kind of iterating and making it better and taking into account everyone's thoughts and ideas, I think we'll just continue to improve, and yeah, again, hopefully more action will be taken as a result. So that's the objective.
All right. I wanted to move on to the quick update on the criticality score. Just FYI, there's a member, one of my coworkers, Caleb Brown, who's going to be working on criticality score and taking a closer look. Caleb's not in a time zone that's suitable for this meeting, so he won't be able to provide updates or take feedback here, but I will relay those, anything that needs to be done live for him. So again, providing updates. There's no updates right now, but and then taking feedback. But of course, this working group's channel on Slack is a great place to chat about criticality score with Caleb, or as usual, GitHub issues. Seems like we have feedback on, where do I send my criticisms or questions or feedback about the whole project, and I'll make sure to, of course, any of those avenues are fine, but I'll make sure to let Caleb know that that's like a community request. Maybe he wants to do something more formal for a way to provide that specific kind of feedback. Any other questions here?
Async communication is good. I'd also like to add that although it's not a mandate, some projects and do kind of shift around their meeting time, so it's not one fixed time, but switches around. The governing boards start meeting at, I think, 6 a.m. Pacific time, because that works out for U.S. East Coast and for China. And it's not too, I think it's not too hideous for Europe either. So, I think if we have more than one person where that impacts, I think we should start. I would love to have some participation, and if I have to show up at an occasional 2 a.m. meeting, I'll hate it, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I think if the project, I don't know if I would suggest moving this meeting just for that project, but if the project is at the point where it needs its own meeting, then of course that would be at a different time. That could be where it needs to be.
That sounds good. Yeah. And if they ever wanted to present to the work group, we could always do a one-off, maybe at a more conducive time for them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That could be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would propose that the update on the criticality score continue in our next gathering. I put in a note real quick that criticality score is valuable, but really is focusing, a lot of its measures are more on how active it is, which is different than how popular it is, and that's okay. But they measure different things.
So I would say this is the exact bit that we are trying to fix. Like, it's a known limitation. And that's where we are trying to gather the data from the package manager ecosystem on what's it's most dependent on or used. But obviously it cannot match all, let's say, some manual case studies too. We need a mix of. So totally agree with you, David, but we're working to fix it.
Right. And this is the challenge that the Harvard folks is, well, where's your top? And what they're doing is they're using SCA vendor analysis of actual applications to get their top of where are the applications using, and then tracing down the dependencies. They're not analyzing activity at all. So, you know, from that perspective, right now they mesh pretty nicely. But yeah, if we can make things better, I'm all for it.
I had one last quick question before we end the meeting. Amir, I don't see you adding anything on the agenda for, working on the spreadsheet. And I know that there's work to be done. Should we be time boxing time in these meetings to do spreadsheet work, or what do you think?
I think that's a good question. I was thinking about that too. One of the first ideas or thoughts that came to mind was doing maybe every other week. So maybe the weeks that I'm facilitating, like that could be like a working session. And then this every other week, the sessions that you facilitate could be more of the normal sessions that we have, updating and figuring out new things to do and improve. Maybe just a thought. I'd love to get the work group's opinion.
Well, I would propose that in general we should, but for the next meeting, I think we have a more fundamental question. How should we create the newer updated list of critical open source software? I had originally thought that we would just take our existing spreadsheet and the Harvard data and basically improve this, have group discussions and improve the spreadsheet based on the Harvard data, updated criticality scores. If this group decides that no, we want to kind of do a clean slate, use the older spreadsheet maybe as an input, but have a voting system and other processes, I mean, that could be awesome. But we're going to have to then agree. Basically, we're going to have to agree on whatever the process is, and we need to have a group discussion about that process. And frankly, we probably need to have some folks proposing processes.
Okay, so how about we'll do that at the next meeting. So we'll have Julia and Jacques, do you think, I don't want to set any deadlines or anything. Do you think maybe next week would be okay to discuss some of your research and talk about what you find, and we can kind of use that session almost dedicated to setting up what we're looking to set up?
It's Chauncey in my case. We're about to ship a pretty big RFC to Ruby Gems about gem signing, so that's probably going to be my focus in the next week or two.
Next meeting. Mm-hmm. Next meeting. I'm sorry, I meant next meeting. Yeah, would be in 2 weeks. Yeah,
it's plausible. I'll give it a crack.
Okay.
I think it's doable from my end.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll do our best. Yeah, I think maybe for now we could try that, Jeff. Just maybe have every other session be like a more intensive working session. And if it doesn't seem like it's working, or maybe it needs dedicated time, we can adjust.
Yeah, I think we will need to have working time and setting down, but I think right now the primary goal is we're going to need to figure out how we're going to create that next tranche.
Okay.
As I said, and if you want, I can try to quickly write down what I thought we were going to do, which was basically continue on what we've done with our draft to make it better. But if that's not right, yeah. Bye, Jack. Thanks so much for. But if that's not a good approach, let's figure out a better approach.
I'm always for building on what has already been done. I mean, a lot of work went into that already, and there was a lot of work prior that went into kind of that first round. So let's start with that in 2 weeks' time. And
do you want to? If we're going to change it up, then why? I'd hate to do a lot of work if we're not going to use it.
Yeah, I propose continuing to use it because, I mean, we put a lot of time into that. I don't see why we need to start from scratch. But if there's a better way, I'm all ears.
So I would propose next meeting, let's start by hearing what Jock can come up with, given he's busy, and what Julia has, and then we can talk about that next steps.
Okay, that works.
All right, well, we're out of time. Let's chat in Slack before the next meeting. Make sure we have what we're going to do done, figured out.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.